England in 1531 knew how to kill a man. The axe, the rope, the fire. But on April 5th of that year, something happened at Smithfield that was different. Not just in degree, in kind. A man was lowered alive into a cauldron of boiling water. The crowd, people who had watched beheadings and burnings without flinching, were shaken. One witness wrote down just 4 words to describe what they heard. He roared mighty loud. That's it. Nothing else. Here's what makes this more than just a brutal execution. This man didn't die because the law allowed it. He died because a king personally rewrote the law to make it possible. And the story behind it involves a poisoned pot of porridge, a dying bishop, a mysterious white powder, and a legal weapon that Henry VIII would go on to use against queens, ministers, and nobles for decades. This is the story of Richard Roose. In Tudor England, your household was your world. The people who cooked your food, poured your wine, you trusted them completely. That trust was the foundation everything else was built on, which is exactly what made poison so terrifying. Not the death itself. Tudor Londoners had made their peace with death. But poisoning was invisible. No confrontation, no weapon. A servant could add something to a pot, walk out, and be across the city before anyone took their first bite. That invisibility didn't just frighten people, it destabilized them. And in February 1531, it struck one of the most politically sensitive households in England. John Fisher, Bishop of Rochester, was one of the few men in England with the spine to openly defy Henry VIII. As Henry spent years trying to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, desperate, grinding, increasingly furious years, Fisher stood in his way. He spoke before Parliament on Catherine's behalf. He put his opposition on the record. That made him powerful enemies. On February 18th, 1531, pottage was served in Fisher's household. 16 guests fell violently ill. A household member named Bennet Kerwin died. A beggar woman named Alice Tripp, who had come only seeking a meal, also died. Fisher himself had skipped lunch that day. Long hours of study had killed his appetite. That small detail may have saved his life. The cook, known variously as Richard Roose, Richard Rouse, nobody seems certain of his actual surname, had already fled by the time suspicion landed on the kitchen. He was tracked down in London and taken to the Tower. There, he confessed. He admitted adding a powder to the pottage. His explanation? A stranger had given it to him. He thought it was a mild purgative, a prank on his fellow servants. He never meant to kill anyone. Whether that was true, or the only story a man on the rack could construct that might keep him alive a little longer, no record can say. The stranger was never found. The powder was never recovered. 10 days after the poisoning, Henry VIII stood before the House of Lords and spoke for over an hour. He argued that poisoning was categorically different from other crimes. The axe and the rope required confrontation, visible, honest force. But poison worked through trust. It turned the most intimate act of daily life into a weapon. And that, Henry argued, demanded a response unlike anything already on the statute books. Parliament delivered one. The Act for Poisoning, 1531. Murder by poison reclassified as high treason. Mandatory punishment, death by boiling. A judicial mirror, the man who used cooking to kill would himself be cooked. The Act also stripped the condemned of benefit of clergy. No priest, no confession, no last rites. Richard Roose would die outside the church entirely. And here's the part historians find most significant. Roose was never actually tried. No jury, no defense, no courtroom. He was condemned by parliamentary attainder, a mechanism that allowed Parliament itself to declare someone guilty and sentence them, bypassing the courts completely. Attainder had previously been reserved for powerful nobles and politically dangerous figures. Using it on a cook was a watershed. It established that the Crown could use Parliament as an instrument of execution against anyone. Henry's government would reach for that tool again and again, against Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, Anne Boleyn herself. The legal machine built for one cook would eventually consume queens. On April 5, 1531, Smithfield got something it had never seen before. A cauldron over a sustained fire. A man lowered in, and a crowd that, despite everything they had witnessed in their lifetimes, was shocked and sickened by what they saw and heard. He roared mighty loud. Roose died without confession, without last rites, without a single clergyman present. For a Tudor man, dying outside the church's sacramental embrace wasn't just a harsh circumstance. It was, by every framework he had been raised to believe, a profound and deliberate additional punishment. He left no final words, no appeal, no statement. He entered the record as a man whose name nobody could agree on. He departed it with a roar. The Act for Poisoning was repealed under Edward VI, deemed too extreme even by Tudor standards. But the attainder precedent? That lived on for decades. And then there is the detail that gives the whole story its bitter edge. John Fisher, the bishop whose household was poisoned, who survived only because he wasn't hungry that afternoon, was executed in 1535, 4 years later, by Henry, beheaded on Tower Hill for refusing to accept the king as head of the Church of England. The man Roose allegedly tried to kill ended up killed by the crown anyway. The bishop who avoided the poisoned pottage could not avoid the axe. Whether the powder was ever truly meant for Fisher, whether Roose was a man who made a catastrophic mistake or was used as an instrument by someone far more powerful, whether anyone needed the investigation to stop exactly where it did, these questions were unanswerable in 1531 and remain unanswerable now.